cold in a lot of part of the U.S., so I'm not optimistic given what we saw last year.
Yeah.
Maybe by 6 months into 2022.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like maybe summer of 2022. All right. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masters, Tim Stanovic. It's Friday, everybody. This is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, so a lot going on, certainly when it comes to businesses breaking up, splitting up, that kind of thing. We're worried about inflation, but I always feel like those geopolitical concerns are always out there.
Yeah, in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking to U.S. foreign policy reporter for Bloomberg News, Nick Wadhams, about a warning from the United States that Russia may be planning the Ukraine invasion.
And like you said, wait, doesn't Russia already kind of...
Didn't we see this play out? Crimea a few years
All right,
ago?
so what you need to know, we'll get to that in just a moment. It's a Bloomberg exclusive. First up, though, let's get a check on the business day. Hey, Charlie Pellet.
Well, hello there, and you had a reference to Johnson & Johnson with its breakup today. It is splitting off its consumer division, following in the footsteps of other big drug makers that have moved to focus on the more profitable pharmaceutical market. J&J shares, they are higher today, member of the Dow. Right now, J&J up by 1.3%. The Dow up 135, up 0.4%. S&P 500 index up 26, up by 0.6. NASDAQ up 127, higher by 0.8%. We're close to session highs, on track, however, for a losing week. Stocks are being led higher by technology and communication services. Inflationary pressures, though, continue to reverberate through markets. S&P advancing for a second day. We've got the 10-year down 0.8 seconds. 10-year yield 1.57%. Spot gold up 0.2%, 18.65 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.9%, $80.88 a barrel on WTI. Bitcoin down now by 2%, 63,757. Early signs of a COVID-19 resurgence are emerging in the Northeast, with cases increasing in 7 of the region's 9 states. The 7-day average of reported COVID-19 cases in the region has climbed 11% over the past week, according to Johns Hopkins University data. Until last week, the region's numbers had trended steadily downward for about 6 weeks. Meanwhile, a jump in infections is prompting Norway to roll out a third dose to everybody over the age of 18. So might the United States follow suit? Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
We won't booster our way out of this pandemic. We have to get everybody to either get the vaccine or do things the hard way and suffer through infection to try to get some level of immunity. And we don't want the latter because of the cost that takes, not only on human suffering, but also the overload that it puts on our hospital system.
Dr. Pekosh with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the vaccine stocks that we track, it is a mixed day today. We do have Pfizer shares down 1%. Its German partner BioNTech down less than 0.1%. AstraZeneca's ADRs down 6.9%. Moderna higher by 2.4%. J&J, Johnson & Johnson breaking up. It is up by 1.3%. Again, recapping, S&P up 25, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This is among our most read on the Bloomberg today. It's a Bloomberg News exclusive. It's about the U.S. raising the alarm with European Union allies that Russia may be weighing a potential invasion of Ukraine. Tensions flaring between Moscow and the bloc over migrants and energy supplies. There's a lot going on. So let's get to it. And joining us with some intel is Bloomberg News U.S. foreign policy reporter Nick Wadhams. He's on the phone from Washington, D.C. Nick, I got to tell you, Tim and I feel like idiots. We're like, well, wait a minute. Doesn't Russia already have power over this area? What's the significance of this? Kind of give us a little bit of a history lesson here.
Well, I think what you're seeing is, yes, Russia has done this before. They've massed troops along the border with Ukraine, and they've made lots of threatening moves. But what the U.S. is saying is they essentially have information, classified intelligence, as well as open source information that makes them believe that this time is different. This time is more serious, and they believe that Vladimir Putin essentially thinks that the time is right. This is his best opportunity that he's going to get in a long time, perhaps years to come, to take more aggressive action and reel Ukraine back into Russia's orbit, even as the government of Volodymyr Zelensky looks to bind Ukraine closer to the West. So they've sent Bill Burns, the CIA director, over to Moscow to tell Putin to cut it out. They say there are a lot of signs here that make them think that this time is the real thing.
What does Putin want with Ukraine?
Well, the big thing is he feels like Ukraine binding itself closer to the West poses a direct threat to Russia's territorial integrity and its sphere of influence. So obviously, it's hard to parse how much of those fears are actually genuine, but Vladimir Putin believes very much in some ways in the old sort of Soviet bloc standards, and believes that Ukraine moving closer to the West and possibly eventually seeking membership in NATO is something that's deeply threatening to him. He does not want to have an enemy or an adversary right on his border.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. That's what I think about. It does feel like, too, Nick, to some extent, I don't know, maybe watching what's going on in China and Europe, and it does feel like that there's almost a recutting of political allies, or people are lining up who their allies are at this point with, stress points over energy, stress points over just business domination, stress points over so many different things, over climate. What is the bigger picture here?
Well, it feels like one of the things that U.S. officials had told me is essentially some of the autocratic nations, China and Russia, believe that they have a unique moment here. They think the United States is suffering from internal divisions or politics between Republican and Democratic parties. They don't believe that the U.S. really has the will or the interest to confront challengers. They also think that more broadly, there are a lot of divisions in the West. The U.S. and France over this botched deal to supply submarine technology to Australia. You have Boris Johnson in the U.K. separating the U.K. from the rest of the EU. Potentially a new migrant crisis. So the theory, as it was put to me, is we're all asking why now, but the question should be why not now? There are leaders around the world who see a rising China, and they think this is their moment to take advantage of divisions and a perceived weakness in the West.
Yeah,
Nick, what do we know about what the U.S. has told its allies in Europe? Just in 30 seconds.
Well, that's the great question, because what I've been hearing from sources I talked to, senior officials in the administration, is if you saw what we're seeing, you would be worried too. And then you ask, and they say, well, okay, it's classified. Of course, that got the U.S. into a lot of trouble in Iraq. Trump administration came under a lot of criticism when they said the threat was so severe with Iran. So, these allegations, were no longer in a situation where the U.S. can just say this and everybody sort of falls into line. They're going to need to back that up. And indeed, that's why you're seeing a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah, I would see that. It almost feels like high school talk. If you knew what I knew, Nick, thank you so much. Appreciate the clarity on that. Bloomberg News U.S. foreign policy reporter Nick Wadhams on the phone from Washington, D.C. Now we have it straight.
We do have it straight.
Thank you so much.
Let's get more world and national news. Standing by in Washington, D.C. is Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Tim. Climate talks are set to stretch into the weekend as leaders work on their final report. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry says one key complaint has come from countries that do not have the money to invest in new and cleaner technologies.
Less developed countries desperately need additional help. We agree with that. From day one at this COP, we've been saying the United States wants to raise the amount for adaptation. We support it.
Kerry is welcoming the latest draft text, which added lines that only unabated coal use and inefficient subsidies be phased out instead of all of them. Vice President Kamala Harris has wrapped up her visit to Paris, telling a news conference she discussed issues from cybersecurity to immigration.
A French reporter asked the vice president about Belarus weaponizing migrants by ferrying them to the Polish border.
We are very concerned about that and closely paying attention to it. The Lukashenko regime is engaged in very troubling activity, and the eyes of the world and its leaders are watching what is happening there.
The vice president said she and French President Macron did not discuss the Australian submarine issue, but did speak of the need to strengthen Western alliances. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
President Biden wants a former FDA commissioner to come back and again lead the powerful regulatory agency. Robert Califf is currently head of clinical strategy and policing of Alphabet's Verily and Google Health units. According to those close to the decision-making, more than a half dozen names were floated for the job before they settled on Califf. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic. So, got some economic news today. This used to be a favorite of Janet Yellen when she was Fed chair. JOLTS.
Yeah, we're talking about the record 4.4 million Americans.
Do you know what JOLTS stands for without cheating?
Job opening.
Keep going. And?
No, you.
Labor turnover survey.
Okay, thanks.
It's a weird one. Anyway, it's JOLTS.
I knew it was JOLTS, though.
You
I just didn't know what it stood for.
So it's basically how comfortable Americans feel quitting because they're like, I can get another job somewhere else.
Exactly. We've talked a lot about the power that the American worker has right now. We've talked about unionization efforts at companies like Amazon and Starbucks going through that right now. We've talked about the quit rate, and we're seeing more data that shows that American consumers and American workers, I should say, American workers, are the ones who feel like they have the power right now.
All right, so let's give everybody the data point. A record 4.4 million Americans quit their jobs in the month of September. The Labor Department's Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey, or JOLTS, showed today. Meanwhile, the number of available positions eased to 10.4 million. So we know what's going on. There's record wage gains. There's attractive terms. We talked about Wall Street, people moving around big time. They're like, I want more time. I want more flexibility. And they're able to quit and get more money. What's interesting, Tim, you and I have talked about this, and I think Joe Weisenthal has pointed it out, this disconnect between the labor market being so tight and people, making more money and being able to move around. Juxtapose that against another report that came out today that U.S. consumer sentiment fell to a decade low in early November. So people are not optimistic about the outlook, yet the labor market is so tight.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychology with that when it comes to inflation and expected inflation. But I think it also speaks to the idea that if people are comfortable quitting their jobs, they know they can get a job somewhere else, and they know they can do that for
So why aren't they more upbeat
pay.
about the outlook?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
It
is
and
strange.
that's weird because usually they go in tandem.
And it's also strange that
economic growth goes in tandem
that
with
it's
that.
lower than it was at the height of the pandemic during lockdowns.
Yeah, there's a lot of unease certainly out there. All right, coming up, we're going to talk about the remarks of the magazine this week. It has to do with a COVID pill, not the Holy Grail.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ pushing higher. We're close to session highs, however, on track for a losing week. Right now, we do have the S&P 500 index up 27 points. That is a gain of about 0.6%. For the week right now, we are showing a loss of just about 0.4%. The Dow higher by 136 points, up 0.4. NASDAQ up 133. That is a gain of 0.9%. 10-year yield 1.57%. Spot gold up 0.1%, 18.64 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.9%, 80.91 the barrel on WTI. Johnson & Johnson shares they are pushing higher, holding on to a gain now of 1.3%. J&J higher on those plans to split. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, got it, Charlie. Thank you so much. Well, the incredible Bloomberg team of Cynthia Coons, Emma Court, and Bob Langreth writing the remarks of this week's Bloomberg Business Week magazine. They're digging into how COVID pills, yes, they may save lives, Tim, but putting an end to the pandemic, that they're not going to do.
They're certainly not, at least not yet. Joel Weber is editor at Bloomberg Business Week. He joins us on the remote from Brooklyn. Cynthia Coons, U.S. healthcare reporter for Bloomberg News, is on the phone from New Jersey. Joel, I read through this story, and one part really sticks out to me. Despite the fact that the widespread availability of vaccines and treatments this year, more Americans have died of COVID in 2021 than in 2020.
I know, isn't that? It's just like such a heartbreaker after everything we've been through. And,
yeah.
You know, the news of the pill about a week ago, COVID pill from Pfizer, led me and my colleagues to sort of turn immediately to Cynthia and co. and say, hey, so this is the beginning of the end, right? But as they wrote and reported and came back to us, there's like not quite so quick. So Cynthia, talk to us about what the pills really mean.
So the pills are an amazing development in some respects. They do create something that we have not had, which is some way to treat people in the earliest stages of COVID. So far, our medical treatments have really been geared towards hospitalized patients, people who are really sick. And so that's a harder to treat patient population. Of course, we do have monoclonal antibodies, but the problem with those, which can be given to earlier stage patients, is they're infusions. So you have to go to a medical center. So they're expensive to administer. It's just a whole different process. So getting a pill like Tamiflu, you might get Tamiflu if you got the flu, is really a remarkable medical achievement if you succeed to get regulatory approval and then the data continues to bear out that they work. That's really great, and that's the positive. The problem is that stat that you pointed to, the idea that more people died this year than last, just talks about, really speaks to how precarious the situation still is. That's the result of Delta, and something else could come on its heels. So the really best step that anyone can take is getting a vaccine and preventing themselves from getting COVID in the first place. So these pills are great, and they'll create, a way for people to get treatment in the earliest days, but we still aren't out of the woods as far as it comes, as far as we're concerned with COVID.
Well, and I also wonder, Cynthia, first of all, what would it take to ramp up production of the pills? And, do we have the time, the money, and the effort to do something like that right now with us still trying to figure out vaccinations?
Well, the good news about pills is it actually is a lot quicker to ramp up production of a pill than it is of a vaccine. And so when you look at the remarkable amount of production increases that Pfizer were able to pull off, for example, for the vaccine, it sort of does give some hope that, maybe we could get these pills into the market really quickly. We could get a lot of them, but all the money has to be aligned. It's really a question of money, and the government put a lot of money into vaccinations. Governments all over the world did that, and they're willing to spend more money on vaccines than pills. Pills are generally cheaper. So there's going to be the economics have to fall into place to make this really happen. But it is possible to do it quickly. The other thing to be aware of is the pills themselves were tested on people who are unvaccinated, high risk, and at the super earliest stages of COVID. That is a very, very specific time to find a patient, a specific type of patient. So we don't know that these results are necessarily going to be repeated in the broader population. And a lot of people, breakthrough cases and so on and so forth. There's a different patient profile going forward. So there's more testing that has to be done to see how they work in other populations.
okay, wait. I think we should break that down a little bit more because the market, when they saw the COVID pill thing, the market reacted very favorable. What are the limitations that we know about the pill and the people that need the pill and where the pill goes?
So right now, the testing's been done on unvaccinated people who are at higher risk of more severe outcomes from COVID. That is going to change. They're going to test these pills on people who are vaccinated and have breakthrough cases, and they will also continue to test them as sort of a just-in-case drug. Like if you had someone in your household got COVID, you might take these pills to prevent yourself from getting COVID in the first place. So there is a big potential market here. But the early stage of getting the COVID diagnosis and getting these pills really quickly, that's key. So with viruses, any antivirals work a lot of different ways, but typically these drugs at least prevent the virus from replicating within the body in such a way that it ravages the body and creates more severe disease. Therefore, the earlier you take it, the better. But we've all taken PCRs. They don't necessarily come back really quickly. And so if you're waiting 3 days for a PCR test result, and wait times might get longer as there's less COVID in the community and this testing effort is not, and the investment may not be there in the long term, are we going to be able to find the COVID patients and identify them quickly enough to get them this drug early enough? I think that the testing infrastructure really has to be in place in order for this to really work.
Yeah, so it's a combination of testing, it's a combination of early detection and early, getting these pills relatively early. Cynthia, it raises the question about what marks the end of the pandemic. If the pills don't end the pandemic, how do we know when the pandemic is endemic?
That's really complicated. Every scientist we spoke to had a slightly different definition. I think there is no classic definition, to be fair, of what you could say is like, this is the moment in time that will ring the bell and it will be over. But I think there's ways to think about it that are more concrete that sort of help. So the flu, on average, kills about 30,000 people a year. And yet we live, we don't wear masks during the flu season. We don't live in lockdown because of the flu. Now, COVID is projected still to take 120,000 lives between now and March. So it's not the flu. No matter what anyone says, it is not the flu, not yet. But as more people are exposed to it, and as more people get vaccinated, and as younger kids get vaccinated, so we get a much bigger swath of the population, then perhaps the transmissibility will start going down, and it will become something. What one scientist said that I really liked was it's about repeated exposure to a virus that makes it weaker and weaker. So as we're exposed to it through vaccinations, boosters, exposure in the community, we may be exposed as years go on. Eventually, it will become a milder and milder illness. But the problem is it's still a novel virus, and we don't know. We didn't see Delta coming. We know that it could have happened, and something like that could still happen. It could become more deadly. So we need to be conscious that we're not at the end yet. But there will be a time at which this becomes just a more normal seasonal virus because coronaviruses typically do that.
As long as we're talking about all of this, we got to talk about Johnson & Johnson, I think, Cynthia, because obviously they're in the vaccine game, and now comes this major corporate strategic decision. What's your take on all that as somebody who's covered pharma and healthcare and Johnson & Johnson so closely?
And just got about 35 seconds.
I'm surprised it took this long. It makes perfect sense. The company, in its form of owning a little bit of everything, was, I think, kind of unwieldy, and the legal battles that it was dealing with in pharmaceuticals and consumer products, I think, were, making it a very difficult company to justify why it was being held together in one piece. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And if they can focus in the drug division and make some clear priorities in terms of what they're working on going forward, perhaps there'll be even better innovation. They've done really well in drugs, and this is a potential for them to just really focus on that in one clear line of business instead of being a little bit of everything.
Well, investors seem pretty happy. Stock's off its highs of the days, but it's still up about 1.1%. We're talking about shares of J&J. Guys, thank you so much. Have a great, great weekend. Cynthia Coons, U.S. healthcare reporter at Bloomberg News, with us on the phone in New Jersey. Joe Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week, on the remote access from Brooklyn. We're going to talk a bit more about that J&J breaking up into two. That's coming up next.
news, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday, November 12th. Stocks gain as tech overcomes inflation worries. S&P up 28 points now, up 0.6%. NASDAQ up 133, up 0.9%. The Dow's up 138, up by 0.4%. 10-year's down 9/32, 10-year yield 1.58%. Spot gold up 0.1%, 18.64 the ounce, while West Texas Intermediate crude up down 0.9%. Crude down 70 cents a barrel at 80.89 right now. Stocks are climbing, led by tech and communication services as inflationary pressures continue to reverberate through markets. What is ahead for the global economy next year? JP Morgan Chase is out with its 2022 long-term capital market assumptions report. Gabriela Santos is global market strategist at JP Morgan Investment Management.
We see very limited scarring from the pandemic, and we're actually optimistic about upside going forward, given all of the productivity gains that we've seen during this time period. There's also been so much monetary and fiscal support that's likely to continue to provide a boost to overall nominal growth.
Oil trading lower, on track to post the longest stretch of weekly losses since March, with President Biden keeping investors guessing about whether he will act to tame higher energy prices that are driving a surge in inflation. ExxonMobil shares, they're lower by 1%. BP's down 0.2%. Chevron lower now by 0.2%. EOG Resources down 0.4%, and Pioneer Natural trading lower by 0.1%. Again, recapping, equities are higher, with the S&P up 28 now, up 0.6%. The Dow is up 140, up 0.4. NASDAQ up 132, a gain of 0.8. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
Yeah, so when you think about the big takeaways of this week in November, I'd say it's a pretty bad week for conglomerates and a great week for breakups.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're thinking about General Electric.
I'm not talking about couples, I'm
GE.
talking about companies.
Yeah, it's talking about companies, not couples. GE, Johnson & Johnson.
Right. And Toshiba, but Johnson & Johnson, right? We were just talking about with Cynthia Coons. We know GE splitting into three, J&J now splitting off its consumer division. And we've seen that among the drug makers who are really focusing on, I guess what some would say, the higher profit pharmaceutical area. All right, let's get to it, and let's bring in our guest. We're going to do that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about a guest that joined David Weston earlier on Bloomberg Television and Radio, J&J CEO Alex Gorsky, who talked about the thinking behind the breakup at J&J.
Both of these businesses have the potential to be growing at least mid-single digits and above going forward. And we think this is going to better position our consumer business in this evolving environment that I mentioned earlier to be even more agile, more flexible, and even more innovative to reach more consumers around the world.
And that, of course, is Johnson & Johnson CEO Alex Gorsky talking earlier with Bloomberg's David Weston. Let's get to it and find out a little bit more analysis on this deal. Bloomberg News health team editor John Larriman with us on the phone from Boston. So, John, we just got off talking with Cynthia Coons about another story that's in Business Week magazine this week, but we did ask her about J&J. She's like, what took them so long that it just made more sense to be divided into two? What's your take, and what are you hearing about this breakup?
Hi, happy to be here. I have to agree with Cynthia. Obviously, this is a company 130 years old. The conglomerate business model has been good for them for a long time, but it was good for Pfizer. It was good for all of these other companies, Novartis, big drug makers that have big consumer divisions, Glaxo as well, all shedding them now. And the reason that they're doing it is because you make a lot more money off of drugs than you do off consumer products. And it's worthwhile to focus your efforts there because you can make big money. I think a lot of these companies really kind of looked at the way that AstraZeneca went heavily into, new drug research, particularly in the cancer field. Cancer after COVID shots now, biggest market for drugs in the world. And these are difficult drugs to produce. They take a lot of concentration, a lot of competition, and a lot of deal-making ability to do that. And J&J, I think, is saying, it's time for us to really kind of grow up and really, start doing our homework in the drug development area.
John, we know that the company has come out and said this is not about the numerous lawsuits over the allegations that its baby powder caused ovarian cancer. But I think for a lot of people listening, a lot of people in our audience, it's hard to separate those things. Does this have anything to do with the lawsuits that J&J has faced?
Well, the company is saying that it doesn't. And I guess we just have to take that at face value. At the same time, this isn't going to hurt at all, right? If their lucrative drug-making business is not connected to their lawsuit-bound consumer division, then that just looks so much. J&J has sort of spent the day kind of selling the profitability, the prospects of the consumer division. But I think what we all know, what everybody has their eyes on is, what's the future of this pharma company? And I think that what they're trying to do, or at least what the net effect of this is going to be to shield it from a lot of liability. As you know, J&J has already taken all those lawsuits, created a division which is going to put into bankruptcy in an effort to try to, to shield the company. And that's still tied up in litigation. That may work, that may not work. But this particular maneuver has a lot of promise behind it.
Yeah, I also do wonder. No, it is interesting. It does feel like, too, John, that we're increasingly in an investment environment where companies really want to understand what the core business is and focus on it, and see a company just kind of focus their efforts on it. And is part of that too maybe what they were hearing from the investment world? Like, let's break it apart so that we can really get some true value here. I mean, I know that's what the CEO talked about, but maybe there is something to that.
Well, we do live in this rapidly changing environment. It's going by so quickly, we sort of forget about it sometimes. This is an environment where there's constant new discoveries, not just in biomedicine, but just in terms of technology, all kinds of technology, right? And it takes a while to understand. It takes a while to master. I think companies or investors in conglomerates may see, their value being surpassed by people who, just sit down and design a few apps, right? And really get to understand a particular area that's extremely profitable. So I think it's I think you're absolutely right. There is a benefit to being single-minded right now because there's so much out there to understand and how to profit off of it.
Okay, so we've talked about the investor side of things. What about the consumer side of things? Are consumers going to see any difference? And I do even hesitate to ask that question because I think a lot of times consumers who don't necessarily know where their products are coming from don't actually know what company owns what products, especially
Tim
when it
wants
comes
to know, am I going to be able to get
CPG.
those Neutrogena skin cream
I was talking
still?
about the baby shampoo.
The
No more
Aveeno,
tears.
the Aveeno, no more tears.
Aveeno, right?
Yeah.
My wife has already started calling them Johnson instead of Johnson & Johnson. So I don't know if it's going to look different that way. But, these are brands that have worked for the public for years and years, and they haven't stopped working yet. And I have to think that we'll see very little, that the continuity there is going to be extremely strong. They're going to try to capitalize that and build on it. And one of the areas that they said they're going to try to get into is more heavily into e-commerce and more heavily into skincare.
Yeah.
And these are things that, these are the coming things these days.
High margin products.
Yeah.
Who gets the credo though? Like that's what it was interesting. David Weston asked about that, which has been a huge, important kind of following for the company in terms of guiding its business decisions.
They have a few months to decide.
Yeah, or maybe they each take it. All right, John Lauerman, thank you so much. Health team editor at Bloomberg News from Boston.
Well, let's get more world and national news. Standing by in Washington, D.C. is Nancy Lyons. Hey there, Nance.
Thanks, Tim. The time is now set for when President Biden holds a virtual summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says it will happen Monday night.
The two leaders will discuss ways to responsibly manage the competition between the United States and the PRC, as well as ways to work together where our interests align.
Psaki says the president will make clear that U.S. intentions and priorities and he will be candid about our concerns with China. Biden will also be meeting with the leaders of Mexico and Canada next Thursday. The U.S. has formalized an agreement with Qatar, which will help evacuate remaining Americans and eligible Afghans wishing to leave Afghanistan. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Qatar will provide services out of its embassy in Afghanistan.
Formalizes our partnership with Qatar to facilitate the travel of Afghans with U.S. special immigrant visas, a role that it's already been playing in many instances, and serve as a transit point for eligible Afghans as they complete their application process.
Blinken also offered an update on Americans still remaining in Afghanistan. He says all U.S. citizens who have requested assistance to depart have been offered the opportunity to do so. COVID-19 is surging in states with high vaccination rates, sparking concern among health officials. New Hampshire, Minnesota, Vermont, Illinois, New Mexico, Rhode Island, and Colorado have all seen the biggest spike over the last 2 weeks. In an effort to combat the surge in Illinois, Chicago Public Schools canceled class today, with the goal students use the day to get vaccinated against the coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. So we wanted to bring you some of the day's headlines when it comes to the world of crypto.
How have we not talked about crypto yet?
I don't know.
We talked a little bit about, Charlie talked a little
You
bit about
tell
Bitcoin
me,
moves.
Tim.
I know. Okay, I will. Because we have some
We're
great
both
crypto.
driving this car. There's two steering wheels.
And we are talking crypto a little later in the program.
We are. We have our weekly crypto segment. I'm going to go to one story by Dow Jones. It talks about Bitcoin mining noise driving some neighbors nuts. And this story takes us to a city in Quebec, 100 miles east of Montreal, got a big revenue lift when it welcomed Bitfarms, a company that makes cryptocurrencies. The 500 people, though, who neighbor the company's computer center got something else, and an escapable drone that is driving many of them crazy.
One person they spoke to for this story describes it as, quote, it's comparable to torture. The Toronto-based Bitfarms makes money by using high-powered computers to generate Bitcoins, the digital currency, of course. Miners compete to add transactions to Bitcoin's ledger by finding numbers that satisfy a formula. The first to do so are rewarded with new coins. Again, we are reading from the Wall Street Journal story.
Exactly. And here's what's going on, too. And again, we come straight from Dow Jones. Powerful computers must be cooled by an array of fans, those computers that are doing all of the mining. They're whirring noise.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. I guess drone, dentist drill.
Has left residents who live near cryptocurrency operations in Quebec, Georgia, Montana, and other places agitated and frazzled. Some compare it to as you said, a giant dentist drill. Others to a fleet of helicopters taking off in their backyards.
That's not great.
This one woman, she's 74, poor Annette Tiverin, 74. She says, I wear earplugs inside my own house. She no longer can sit on her porch. The noise sounds like 1,000 hair dryers blowing in unison, she says.
Okay, well, the mining companies say they're putting quieter equipment and working on adding sound barriers around the plants, but obviously it's not bothering neighbors now.
That would kind of drive me a little crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Well, anyway, that's
So you're not going to be doing any Bitcoin mining at home?
No, just up. You?
No.
No, not going to happen. I could see the neighbors like right next door. We share walls. What's going on in there? All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are higher across the board. We're close to session highs. We are on track, however, for a losing week. Let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks trading in the green right now, with the Dow currently up 156 points. S&P's gained 31. NASDAQ climbs by 160. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.58%. Gold is little change. Transports rise 31 points. And Bitcoin is trading lower by 1.8%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were at telecom, tech, and the industrials, while energy was under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, 3M, Apple, and Home Depot, while Disney and IBM led to the downside. In deal news, CyrusOne nears a deal to be sold to private equity, and Johnson & Johnson plans to split into two publicly traded companies. Wrapping things up, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise fell 8% as Goldman Sachs downgraded it to sell. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg-type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. It's time now for our weekly crypto update. It's brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Trade crypto for less coin with commissions just 12 to 18 basis points and no hidden spreads or markups. Learn more at ibkr.com/crypto.
So Solidus Labs was founded back in 2017 by former Goldman Sachs employees, company focusing on cryptocurrency trading, surveillance, and risk monitoring tools. And our next guest leads the company's regulatory team. So in our weekly crypto segment, we welcome Kathy Krenniger. She's former director of the U.S. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, during the Trump administration. And as we said, she's VP of Regulatory Affairs at Solidus Labs. She joins us on the phone in New York City. Kathy, nice to have you here with us on Bloomberg Radio. Tell us a little bit about the company and what you guys are setting out to do.
Yeah, thank you, Carol, and thanks so much for having me. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be with you. The company really is an exciting one in the crypto space. We are crypto native, as you noted. We do market surveillance and risk monitoring for our clients, who are exchanges, broker-dealers, market makers, increasingly players in the DeFi space in crypto. And what we're doing is really focused on bringing market integrity and transparency into this growing world of crypto. So we identify potential manipulation in price and volume. We provide those alerts to our clients. And that very act of surveillance, as it does in traditional markets, really precludes a lot of bad behavior that is taking advantage of investors and consumers. So it's important to have these capabilities in place, and the crypto industry at large has come a long way on that.
What is the bad behavior that consumers have to be on the lookout for?
Well, really, again, this is a new and fascinating area, clearly a lot of growth opportunity. But as in any other area and asset class, investors need to understand what they're getting into. And in the crypto space, as we saw, and as I said, it's absolutely improving. But there are opportunities for those to manipulate, because there's a lot, particularly if you look at DeFi or arenas that are getting more and more on the cutting edge as every new thing comes forward. But keeping an eye out for that insider trading issue that happens in traditional markets, a little different in crypto. So there are players who can engage in front running, or miners in the DeFi space, that trading's happening on block. They can actually do front running in an interesting way as well, and engage in sandwich attacks. So actually pulling the rug out from underneath those who are seeking to engage at a certain price point and have that expectation. So a lot of pricing manipulation activity that can happen if you're not looking for it. And as I said, that is where Solidus Labs comes into play to really identify that, preclude it from happening, and we're talking to so many of our clients and providing that service for them.
Well, it does definitely feel like a bit of the wild, wild west when it comes to crypto. We're still figuring it out. There's often new entrants, and you just don't kind of know where it's coming from. There's a lot of cryptocurrencies that are out there, maybe not all on the scale of Bitcoin or Ethereum, but or Ether, but you definitely continue to see the growth there. Kathy, I am curious. You talk about working with your clients. So what is it that is a common thing that comes up that requires, the surveillance or the risk monitoring? What would be the number one or number two kind of worry that comes up?
Well, it really is around a price and volume. I mean, absolutely. Exchanges and others are looking at, I guess it starts too with the origination and destinations of funds. That's where regulators were focused across the globe initially, to preclude money laundering, preclude financing of terrorism activity. A lot of concerns around that. Certainly of cybersecurity issues and ransomware concerns. But then the next iteration really is also this market manipulation. We all have a responsibility to protect consumers, protect investors when they expect a certain trade to go through. They expect that that price and volume is not being manipulated and they're not being ripped off and fraud's not happening. So really, again, monitoring for that activity and looking for that type of behavior. So the exchanges, so much of crypto, I guess it's worth saying right now, 80 to 90% of the volume in trading is really centralized. So it's not happening on the blockchain right now. Mm-hmm. You have centralized exchanges that are where the trading activity is happening, which is a big use case for our monitoring. So there is an opportunity really to bring transparency to that area through the monitoring to know that you're being protected in that system. But again, at DeFi, as you look at the trades happening right on that blockchain, it's a completely different use case and different types of manipulation that can happen there. And it's just with the evolving technology and evolving space, we have to constantly be looking for, again, behaviors that are frankly out of the norm. Right. We have the capability to understand the different actors engaged, the different institutions and the different retail entities, and say, okay, are they operating like a peer? Are they operating in a way that makes sense? Yeah, we're really kind of, it does feel like we're in that early phase of just learning so much to figure out kind of where things can potentially go wrong or hurt, certainly investors. Kathy, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Kathy Krenniger, she is former director of the CFPB. That was during the Trump administration. She's currently VP of Regulatory Affairs at Solidus Labs, joining us on the phone in New York. You're listening to Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, everybody. It is Bloomberg Business Week. We got 29 minutes to go until we wrap up this day and week.
All right. We got the song of the day coming up. I'm just thinking back to what...
do a little Go-Go's for us.
Ooh. He's nodding, but I don't know what his nod means. No, he's got a poker face. Yeah, he does.
All right.
Dave Wilson, who we're talking about.
All right, let's get back to Charlie Pellet with a check on that trading day. Charlie, we're getting ready to wrap up the week.
Indeed, 28 minutes to go, wrapping up a losing week. Carol Master, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all advancing right now. Just want to bring you a headline from New York State as we update the number of virus cases. New York reporting 6,100 new virus cases and 30 deaths. Those are New York State numbers. S&P up 35 right now, up by about 0.8%. The Dow up 194, up 0.5. NASDAQ up 165, up by 1%. 10-year yield 1.57%. Equities are climbing, led by technology and communication services as inflationary pressures continue to reverberate through markets. Again, that 10-year yield 1.57%. Spot gold up $1.42 the ounce right now at 1863, up 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1%, 80.78 for a barrel of WTI. A COVID outbreak in Maine, one of the country's most vaccinated states, continues to worsen in what some experts say is a glimpse of the next wave of the pandemic. Maine has the 5th highest rate of vaccination in the U.S., according to the Bloomberg Vaccine Tracker. A jump in infections has prompted Norway to roll out a 3rd dose to everybody over the age of 18. So might the United States follow suit? Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and he says we need to broaden our strategy.
Up until now, we've been focusing on short-term responses, getting protection in the population quickly. We've got to start rethinking these immunization schedules to induce long-term antibody levels. And I don't think that's going to need an annual booster, but it may take a booster over the course of, let's say, 2 or 3 years and a different schedule of vaccination to give us that long-term immunity that we need to keep this virus away.
And that's Dr. Pekosh with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Checking some of the vaccine stocks that we track on a regular basis. Pfizer down 0.7%. BioNTech, its German partner, up by 0.2%. Those are the ADRs. ADRs of AstraZeneca tumbling now by 6.8%. Moderna higher by 2.8%. Johnson & Johnson up 1.3%. Johnson & Johnson plans to split itself in 2. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. This is Bloomberg.
Fire keeps on burning. I'm working the code. Down the
Nice. Little Bruce for us.
Indeed.
That's really nice. Is this new? Is this some new
Relatively new. It's from his High Hopes album back in 2014. Down in the Hole, and you heard Patty Scalfa there on the...
Is that Mrs. Bruce?
That would be Mrs. Bruce.
Mrs. Springsteen.
That's a good pick, Dave, and it actually is directly tied to the title of your chart.
Exactly. Now,
what came first?
Well, you know, Tim, that's how it usually works.
Not every day.
Not every day.
But how did this one work? Did you pick the song and then...
Well, you know, there is a rather more raucous song called Down in a Hole.
Yeah, I know that one.
Alice in Chains?
Yeah.
So I thought Bruce's song was kind of more fitting.
Hey, this is a family show, kids.
That's a good Alice in Chains song.
Okay, anyway, go ahead.
In any case, this is about the hole that stock investors are in when you figure inflation into the equation. And it's something that Liz Ann Saunders over at Charles Schwab did, and she had a Twitter post out on it yesterday. And I basically reproduced her chart, you know, looking at the S&P 500's earnings yield. So it's the inverse of the price-earnings ratio. Right now, you've got the S&P 500 at a P at about 25.5. So, you know, you turn it on its head, that works out to about a 3.9% dividend yield. But we found out this week that inflation, if you look at consumer prices, is running above 6%, 6.2 to be more
So much for
precise.
that yield.
Absolutely. I mean, you have a negative
Right.
real earnings yield of 2.3%. That is the lowest ever looking at monthly data since the S&P 500 was introduced back in 1957. The previous low, negative 2.1%, March 1974. That was a time when you had a recession and a bear market going on. You have neither at this point. We've seen the S&P 500 setting records, and the economy is expanding, and yet here we are. So a very different scenario than you had back in 74, but it gets you to the same place, which works against stock investors. It's the question of how do you keep up with inflation?
Right.
And the answer is not all that well when you look at stocks and inflation and where they are now. So if you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
So you do wonder if some point investors are like, wait a minute, what am I paying for? What am I really getting? Although then it goes to there is no alternative, because where do you go elsewhere maybe in terms of seeking yield?
Right, the situation's even worse if you look at the 10-year Treasury.
Exactly.
You know, even at 1.6%, you're talking about a negative yield of more than 4.5%. So it's even worse when you look at it from that perspective. It's a bigger valuation question that's confronting investors, and it really comes down to, is inflation going to stay around for a while, or is it going to prove as transitory as the Federal Reserve would like it to be?
So tell us,
Hence
Dave.
you buy
Come on.
Wait,
What's it going to be?
hence you buy Bitcoin, right? The new inflation hedge.
No, not today.
Well, not today,
Yeah.
perhaps, but in general, I don't know, Dave, right?
I don't know either.
I don't know. Okay. Dave's like, I'm done, Masser. Let's do my stock of the day.
Exactly. Spectrum Brands Holdings. This is a company that makes building products, think quick-set locks and Pfister faucets, among other things, and household items like Foreman grills and Black Flag bug spray.
Tim has a few grills.
I had
from what
Foreman
understand.
grills. I've had my share of Foreman grills.
Hasn't everybody had a Foreman grill?
I have a Foreman grill.
See?
And I own up to it. In any case, they came out with fiscal fourth quarter results today. Sales and earnings beating analyst average estimates in Bloomberg survey. Their forecasts for the current fiscal year also better than projected. I mean, they're looking for growth, and analysts were looking for decline. So things are going their way. I mean, they're having issues, no surprise, with supplies and with all the things that companies have been talking about, deliveries or whatever. So put it all together, though, and companies doing well enough that its shares set a record today. Well, I shouldn't say that. Highest price since February 2018. And at the moment, they're up about 10.5%. And the ticker here, Spectrum Brands, SPB.
Up 31% so far this year, and they had a pretty decent run last year as well, and the year before, so they've been on quite a tear.
There you go.
All right, let's go home and make, let's go use
Grilled
our Foreman
cheese,
grills.
grilled cheese on the George Foreman.
Little ham,
Very
little
easy to do.
Gruyere on some rye.
That's like a
melted.
dorm room staple. Okay,
It's a dorm room
absolutely.
All right, Dave, you have a good weekend. Dave Wilson there. Let's get back to D.C., check on world and national news, and over to Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. The White House is prepping for Monday's presidential signing of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Today, Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked if the signing ceremony will be attended by Republicans.
We will see. We've invited a broad group of Republicans, some in Congress, governors, mayors, individuals who played a role in helping move the infrastructure bill forward. And as we get close to Monday or on Monday, we'll provide you, of course, a list of attendees.
Psaki says later Monday, President Biden will hold a virtual summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. An unprecedented number of Americans quit their jobs in September.
A record 4.4 million Americans left their jobs. The quits rate, the number of quits in a month as a percent of total employment, increased to 3% in September, and that's a record that dates back 21 years. And hiring challenges are not going to get easier. The latest jobs report highlights a low participation rate, plus a quarter of U.S. workers are considering a job change or retirement in the next 12 to 18 months. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
1 week after a stampede killed 9 people at the Astro World Festival in Houston, a lawsuit has been filed involving more than 200 victims. Attorney Ben Crump says they were injured mentally and physically when the crowd surged toward the stage during rapper Travis Scott's performance.
They went with family and friends. They never fathomed that it would be the worst nightmare of their life.
Crump claims the organizers knew people were being trampled and did nothing to stop it. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic. And let's roll out the green carpet because Elon Musk topping $500 billion list of green billionaires.
Congratulations, Elon. Congratulations.
Yes. We'll give you some Shiba Uno. What is it?
Shiba Inu.
I can never remember. All I can think of is Uno, the card game. I'm like, no, it's not that.
It's the dogs, Carol.
It's the dogs. So the 15 billionaires on Bloomberg Green's ranking showcase those really explosive growth of electric vehicles, batteries, and solar power. Devin Pendleton writes the story, really bringing together our green team along with our wealth team, and just checking through the list of those that rank up high.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. 8 of the top 10, Carol, are all in China, of these billionaires.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Musk, or I should say, not every dollar of these fortunes. Just to talk a little bit about how it comes around, right? Because if you think about Elon Musk, he also has SpaceX fortune tied in there.
Yeah.
Not every dollar in these fortunes is derived from climate-aligned businesses whose core products reduce greenhouse gas emissions. With Musk, though, his green net worth, or the portion of his fortune that's tied to cars and solar, is $247.9 billion. That is 86% of his overall wealth. It does exclude his interest in other businesses, such as space rockets.
Yeah, exactly. Number 2, as you said, is an individual in China of the company CATL. They're the world's biggest maker of EV batteries, supplies car manufacturing, including Tesla, Toyota, BMW, and Volvo, which is a reminder of that global supply chain when it comes to auto industries. Its lithium ion phosphate batteries were cheap enough to let Tesla trim the price of its Model 3 by almost 10%. Green net worth, about 95.2. I think it's Zheng Zuquan, Huang Xinglen, and Lai Ping.
Yeah, 80%.
Those are the individuals behind that company.
Well, as I mentioned, Carol, 8 of the 10 on the list hail from China. That's a
Yep.
sign of the nation's preeminence as a manufacturing hub for clean technologies, despite its leaders' conspicuous absence from the COP26 summit.
That is a story in its own. All right, we'll put it out on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing. 13 minutes to go until that closing bell clangs here in New York. Right now, the S&P up 31, up 0.7%. The Dow up 177, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ up 147, up 0.9. 10-year yield this Friday afternoon, 1.57%. Equities being led higher by technology and communication services as inflationary pressures continue to reverberate through markets. Gold is up 0.1%, $18.64 the ounce, up 2.32. Crude down 1% right now, $80.80 a barrel. Blue Apron Holdings contending with pent-up demand for travel as customers eager to go on vacation pause their meal kit subscriptions. Blue Apron shares, they're lower now. Blue Apron in the red, down 3.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. It's 3:48 on Wall Street.
The following is an editorial from Bloomberg Opinion.
Real progress is being made at the United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow, but in one respect, it has been disappointing. Rich country governments still haven't lived up to their decade-old promise to channel $100 billion to emerging economies annually to help them fight climate change. They had pledged to hit that goal starting in 2020, but they haven't delivered. Governments now say they're on track to supply the promised sum by 2023. Set against what rich countries spend on other programs, and remembering what's at stake, the initial commitment was already far too small. Failing to meet even that goal on time is hard to excuse. The rich world is responsible for climate change and owes developing countries far more help in grappling with it than it has given. It should set this right without further delay. This editorial was written by the Bloomberg Opinion Editorial Board. I'm David Shipley. For more Bloomberg Opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPI and Go on the Bloomberg Terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
I'm driving in my car.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. This is not a twin.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
TikTok, everybody. Just about 10 minutes left in. What?
Yeah, it's like Friday. The countdown is on. 10 minutes.
Major companies breaking up, inflation worries. What am I missing?
Retail sales next week.
Retail sales next week. We got a bunch of Fed speakers again next week. Hey, Bill Smead, let's bring you in. Let's get to the close because just a few minutes left to wrap up the trading week. Bill Smead, CEO, CIO over at Smead Capital Management. Smead Value Fund, by the way, continuing to beat just about all of its peers so far this year and over the past 5 years, returning on average nearly 18% annually, at least by Bloomberg measurements. Bill on the phone in Arizona. Bill, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
What do you make of this week's trade? You sound pretty somber and quiet.
Well, the markets have been very strong, and we've benefited greatly. It's a classic rotational bull market in a incredibly favorable environment with easy money and low interest rates. And we're told long time ago not to confuse brains with a bull market.
And have we been doing that?
Oh, no question. I don't know if you saw the report today. Something like 50% of the option trading is in just two stocks,
wow.
Tesla and Apple. So the small investors, the newbies, the people that have come into the market in the last 2 years that are roughly between 30 and 50 years old are whipping it up like butter, and they're buying the more speculative things at will. And that is exactly what a financial euphoria episode is, but there's no clock on the wall, right? Buffett always says that a financial euphoria episode is like Cinderella's ball. When the clock strikes 12, it's all going to turn to pumpkins and mice. No one puts a clock on the wall, so you don't know what time it is.
So you said not to confuse brains with a bull market. Is that what you said?
Yeah. In other words, look, what we know about the history of the stock market is it's there to move money from impatient people to patient people. And we also know that it's not a democratic institution. It's not, investment markets are not created for the majority of people to succeed. And this idea that we're going to encourage everyone to invest because everyone is going to succeed at this together is kind of like saying there's going to be as many Major League Baseball players as you want.
But Bill, are you drawing a difference between day trading and what you see happening with retail investors and what you consider perhaps people saving for retirement?
Yeah, and again, that normally is a good thing. Dollar cost averaging, buying a broad swath of quality companies is normally a very successful way to retire and just ride through all the ups and downs. But once every 15 or 20 years, we get in a situation where it starts getting a bit mindless and becomes detached from the underlying values of the business. And then what happens is you go through markets that are bad enough for 3 or 4 years to drive out a series of people that get burned so badly they'll never want to do it again.
Well, what in particular, Bill, do you feel like is just so overinflated at this point?
Well, the first thing is the bonds are incredibly inflated. The long duration bonds, a 10-year bond at 1.57% means that you are making a negative real return of 3.5%. The way Buffett explains it, he says the interest rates serve as gravitational pull. High rates pull PE ratios down. Low rates drive PE ratios up. And we're at only the third time since 1970 that we have substantial negative real interest rates. The other two times were the end of 74 and the end of 1979. So again, I have no idea. Nobody does know how long these low rates are going to persist. But those artificially inflate the prices of things well above historical norms and will be normalized at some point. And again, it's just, will it be a year or 2 years, or will it be 5? I don't know.
Hey, we just want to mention a headline crossing. Hang on for a second, Bill. Steve Bannon indicted for contempt of Congress. This is coming from the Department of Justice and just crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Just seeing headlines, not necessarily seeing much of a write-through yet, but nonetheless, we're assuming this maybe has something to do with the Capitol riots, or no, not necessarily.
Perhaps. Yeah, for contempt of Congress, and I think he was called before them. But we'll bring you updates as soon as we do get those.
Yeah, we'll look for a little bit more to kind of fill that out for you. But again, the headline is the Department of Justice saying that Steve Bannon, of course, former President Donald Trump, key insider certainly on his campaign and into the administration. But again, the DOJ saying that Steve Bannon was indicted for the contempt of Congress.
And somebody we should note at the 11th hour in the Trump administration was pardoned by President Trump. So this is separate from that, of course.
Okay.
Hey, Bill, back to you, and just thinking about how our audience should trade this inflationary environment right now.
Yeah, it's actually a wonderful time to invest if you're willing to do what most people don't want to do, which is provide capital to things that meet an economic need, but that the market is trying to sort out what their usefulness is 15 or 20 years from now. So you look at Dillard's fantastic results, and we want to be their landlord with Class A suburban malls. And you own property, right? So the property becomes more valuable automatically as the inflation goes up. We want to provide electricity to battery-charged cars and gasoline to carbon transportation, because we're going to have that for at least 10, if not 20 more years. And what's going to happen is you're going to get rich the next 5 years as these companies spend a few years reporting earnings at $80 a barrel.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Hey, Bill, thank you so much. Bill Smead, of course, Chief Investment Officer at Smead Capital Management, joining us on the phone from Arizona. And as we do, we've just got a few minutes left in today's trading session. Those equity averages off their highs of the day, still up about 32 points on the S&P 500, but still looking for a down week on the S&P after 5 consecutive weeks of gains. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 181 points, and the NASDAQ up about 151 points.
Yeah, but still, like you said, Carol, over the last 5 days, we are seeing the S&P 500 going to decline about 0.3%, the NASDAQ down about 0.7, and the Dow down about 0.6%.
All right, and folks, of course, it's been an interesting week, certainly with heightened inflation concerns. That has certainly been playing out, and that has certainly been indicative when it comes to the bond market.
Coming up next, it's our coverage of Beyond the Bell, our cross-platform coverage with our friends at Bloomberg TV. It's on YouTube, Bloomberg Radio, and Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick, Taylor Riggs, Caroline High gone. Shalini Bass again, counting you down to the closing bell. We're here to help take us beyond the bell. Carol Master and Tim Stenovic are bringing together our global simulcast, bringing together our Bloomberg television, radio, and YouTube audiences here. Up day here for the S&P 500, 0.7%, a little bit of a rebound, Carol, but we're still down on the week.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's where I wanted to go. Just taking a look at the weekly returns here, down about 0.6% on the Dow, down about 1/3% on the S&P 500, down 0.7% for the week overall on the NASDAQ. But for the S&P 500, we've had 5 weeks of consecutive gains, but as you mentioned, Romaine, that's not how it's playing out. And Tim, we're definitely seeing that in the trade today.
Yeah, I'm watching closely what's bringing the S&P 500 lower, what's dragging it down. Airlines like American Airlines, United Airlines, also cruise ship companies, Carnival Cruise Lines, Norwegian Cruise Line Holding Company. A good reminder that COVID is still with us. George Ferguson at Bloomberg Intelligence says at least about airlines, the COVID flare-ups in China, Europe, and the U.S. are causing a little bit of a sell-off.
And Tim, we're walking sort of this fine line of this reopening trade and a restarting of this economy without then having to push inflation much higher. And you only restart that economy and you only reopen once. But inflation, Shanali, is proving to be less transitory than we thought. We talked about the CPI numbers and then the University of Michigan numbers that we got this morning, really putting that into perspective.
Yeah, the consumer sentiment number, got to wonder how much worse that gets as we expect inflation to get worse. We're waiting for those retail earnings as well. So what does the fourth quarter have to bring?
And this gets to the idea here about the pain being felt on the ground, not necessarily being felt by people in the market, at least not to the same extent or in the same way. A very layered recovery here. We talk about it a lot on this program, at least on the television side, the unequal recovery. For our television and radio audiences, we're getting the closing bell right now. The Dow Jones Industrial Average going to finish the day higher by about 0.5% here. Of course, it's still going to be down on a weekly basis by about 0.6%. S&P 500 up by 0.7% on the day, down 0.3% on the week. The NASDAQ Composite higher by about 1% on the day, and also, I'm repeating myself, down, of course, on the week. And then let's take a quick look here at the Russell 2000. That cyclical trade tried to rev up a little bit earlier in the week, couldn't really get out of its own way. Higher here by about 0.1% on the day, down on the week. Russell 2000 down 1% on a weekly basis.
Yeah, definitely though a risk on trade today. If you just take a look at the breakdown, just basic breakdowns on the S&P 500. I know we're going to dig deeper into some of the group movers, but if you look at the S&P 500, 330 names higher today, 172 lower. So we definitely saw much more in the green today, and that's a result of those overall equity moves to the upside, Taylor.
Yeah, and you certainly see that within the sector breakdown, the winners and the losers for the radio audience that we do every day. And there's a lot of green, even in some of the loser spots. So, Carol, that really speaks to some of the broad-based and perhaps maybe more gainers on the day that you were referring to. What's really interesting, quickly, I'll just run you through some of the gainers. It's media and it's the retailing index. You're up about 1.5%. I think next week we're getting Lowe's, Home Depot, TJX companies. You're getting a big gauge on the consumer, of course, pushing forward into next week. Quickly at the bottom, interesting story with energy, banks, and autos down at the bottom. Autos off about 2.25%. Some of that might be Tesla. And of course, banks as well getting hit hard as, well, you're actually seeing bonds yields climbing, Carol, something that you traditionally don't see.
All right, quick team poll. Who likes to shop at TJ Maxx? I'm just going to say, I know. Come on. Who doesn't love to shop there?
I don't.
Oh, really?
No.
These two too
I want
bougie.
things orderly where I could find them.
You don't like to do the treasure hunt?
No,
I
not at all.
love a good treasure hunt, Carol.
like
Carol and I are going to TJ Maxx next weekend together.
Totally. Deal.
Good. Can I give you a list?
No, if you don't
Bow
like
ties.
it, if you don't like it, you don't get anything. All right, let's get to J&J and some of the gainers in today's session. Johnson & Johnson, of course, it has been the week for big conglomerate breakups, and they're breaking up into two companies. We know the pharmaceutical side, the consumer side.
Remember that Neil Sedaka song, Breaking Up is Hard to Do?
Apparently, it's not hard to do anymore, right? General Electric, J&J, Toshiba, also breaking up into three different
Have you heard
companies.
of Johnny Paycheck?
Johnny Paycheck.
Caroline's never.
I'm not as old as you. Oh, wait, did I?
Oh my gosh.
Did I say that?
No, that's not true.
Oh, little shade. Okay, so J&J breaking up into two companies. We know about that. They're going to focus on pharma. Stock up 1.2% at the close. Rivian, oh my God, you guys, up again today, up 5.7%. It is now up, I think, roughly 64% in the 3 days that it has been trading as a publicly held company. Market cap well above, I think it was about 111 billion. I should check that one. But nonetheless, it is more than GM, Ford, and now more than Daimler. 113 billion market cap.
Did you see the great stat that Ed Ludlow had on the terminal?
Which one?
That this is the most valuable company to have basically effectively zero revenue.
Isn't that great?
I know.
It's good.
I mean, is it great?
It's
I don't
good
know
to
if
be
that's
an
great.
American. Well, Amazon did it, right? For a while. Like, think about how long.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway,
you make good points every now and then.
He is on.
I got to do it once in a while. Facebook, soon to be Meta, top of the NASDAQ 100. The only thing I thought was interesting, Morgan Stanley came out with a note saying that the metaverse only gets real when Apple actually joins in. So I just wanted to share that with my lovely team.
Speaking of shade, that was a little shade at Meta Platforms, right? They go and change their name. They do this big presentation. And saying that Morgan Stanley saying it's not quite real yet. Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little bit about Tesla,
but it's not
because
real. It's the metaverse.
That is actually by definition. It is not real.
We could be in the metaverse
Certainly real
right
to
now.
investors, though, at a certain point, right? Let's talk a little bit about Tesla. Shares finishing down. Yeah, he did. That's what happened. Elon Musk sold more shares. So about $687 million worth, more than 600,000 shares, the most recent sale. So if you're keeping track, $5.7 billion so far this week. Remember, this does come after his Twitter poll over the weekend, but at least some of these were put into place and put into plan before that. Still hasn't sold 10%, though. Lordstown Motors finishing the day down by more than 17%. The EV startup said late yesterday that production will be delayed due to supply chain disruptions, component and material shortages. What was what the company cited. Adam Jonas over at Morgan Stanley saying that cash levels, though.
Did you say Nick Jonas?
Adam Jonas.
Oh, okay,
he covers
checking.
Tesla too, by the way.
Okay.
He said cash levels at Lordstown are below the minimum cash balance required to launch and run a car manufacturing business at scale, even contract manufacturing capacity, as Lordstown is trying to do. Also, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, HPE, finishing the day down by 8.1%. The worst performer in the S&P 500 today, all about a downgrade from Goldman Sachs from neutral to sell, lowering the price target from $16 to $14 a share.
You know, it is my kind of week that unfortunately I missed, but I swoop in on a Friday just to talk about
these one-day work weeks.
The reaction that we've seen in the bond markets. I mean, Carol, pretty unbelievable. We started out last Friday at a 145 on the 10-year. You're now up to a 157, 189 on the 30-year. You migrate north to a 195. Now, you haven't really broken above that 2% level, but this really kicks us off to where I want to go next. If it was PPI, it was CPI, it was the University of Michigan sentiment showing that consumer sentiment is down to a 10-year low because the 1 year ahead inflation expectations are now 4.9%. All of this is putting the Treasury market into some reaction function of where we think inflation is going.
Well, we really did think about you a lot, Taylor, throughout the week as we saw gyrations, certainly in the Treasury market. And it is interesting to see where we saw the moves in particular, especially at the shorter end of the curve. So I do wonder, follow the bond market, see what it, ultimately tells us. And I do wonder when the equity market's going to catch up in terms of, especially when you think about real yield and what it means for the equity plays.
And we should point out, when you look at these break-evens, you look at inflation expectations, there were, of course, a lot of hay made over that 10-year, getting above 276 at one point on the day. But you talk about how expectations further out on that curve are lower and expectations on the shorter end of that curve are higher. That it would actually lend some credence, at least on a theoretical basis, to the idea that this is transitory. At least the market, the bond market, is pricing in the more transitory path here for inflation. But then, of course, you look at that Michigan sentiment data, and that gives you a sense here that real people on the ground, who go to the grocery store and have to buy things, they're rustling around at TJ Maxx, Shanali, and I don't know. What are you buying at TJ Maxx?
Everywhere.
Like a rug?
Yeah,
A ruffled shirt?
That's home goods.
You can't find them anywhere
That's
else.
home
But you know,
goods.
the worse the bond market looks, there's this narrative that's being built that equities are the only place to go here. But to Carol's point, when does it catch up with equities? We're not yet done with earnings
Is TJ
season.
Maxx different from Marshall's?
No, they're all under the TJX umbrella.
So they're all the same thing.
I hope my husband isn't listening because I know too much.
How much? Oh yeah. How much have you spent?
There's
there?
home goods, there's TJ Maxx, and there's Marshall.
Well, I mean, Carol's got like the 3 boats that she's got to furnish. So I mean,
That's
she
why
needs...
she's a TJ Maxx.
Wow, shade.
I gotta go. No, you know what's interesting though, going back to economics, you know, you have people quitting left and right. That JOLTS number was pretty remarkable. And yet you have consumer sentiment so low. And we've talked about this, right, guys? The connection between what you see in the labor market. Usually if it's going well, you feel pretty good about the outlook and the economy. And we're seeing this disconnect. And it just doesn't quite make sense to me.
And you do wonder if some of that data, we had Molly Smith on for our radio audience earlier, Tim, and she tried to tie it all together where you're seeing the quit rates because people are feeling that inflation is hurting them. And if you can't get a raise at the current job, are you jumping and quitting at record levels to go to a new employer to get a higher wage? And frankly, if you're not getting a 6% raise, that's the latest CPI print, then you're actually losing money. And so all of it sort of ties in together.
Yeah, it ties back to exactly what Romaine was talking about just now with inflation expectations, because if people are expecting inflation to go up, it doesn't matter if it's transitory or not, because their consumer behavior, what they ask for their bosses from as far as a raise goes, that's going to reflect inflation expectations, and it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
You know what they should ask for is a turkey, because turkeys are pretty expensive this year, so that's what we should be asking our bosses for. Free turkeys.
Taylor, close your ears.
Stop killing our animals.
And you cannot get that at TJ Maxx. I'm just going to point that out there.
Are you sure?
Yeah, we will.
Beyond meat turkey for Taylor.
No. All right, we got to run. Guys,
Did you hear about the dolphin that died? The dolphin tail?
Romaine on a Friday?
With the prosthetic?
Geez, you had to go there?
Oh,
right.
I thought we were celebrating.
Well, everybody else have a good weekend. We'll talk about
Sorry to
Romaine
end on
later.
a down note.
All right, we'll see you again, same time, same place on Monday.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, of course, wrapping up the markets on this Friday with our TV team, Taylor, Shanali, and Romaine. I don't know about the dolphin thing. I think I'm not going to go there.
I don't either. I guess we'll Google it.
Okay. Let's get to world and national news. We got a lot to get to. Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. Former advisor to the Trump administration, Steve Bannon, has been indicted by a federal grand jury for failing to comply with the subpoena issued by the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. The Department of Justice says in a statement that Bannon is charged with one contempt count involving his refusal to appear for a deposition and another involving his refusal to produce documents. If found guilty, each count of contempt of Congress carries a minimum of 30 days and a maximum of 1 year in jail, as well as a fine of $100 to $1,000. The U.S. is raising the alarm with European Union allies that Russia may be weighing a potential invasion of Ukraine as tensions flare between Moscow and the bloc over migrants and energy supplies. Russia has massed along the border with Ukraine before. Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams is following developments.
What the U.S. is saying is they essentially have information, classified intelligence, as well as open source information that makes them believe that this time is different. This time is more serious, and they believe that Vladimir Putin essentially thinks that the time is right. This is his best opportunity that he's going to get in a long time, perhaps years to come, to take more aggressive action.
Bloomberg's Nick Wadhams says a Kremlin official is dismissing the concerns as unfounded efforts to exacerbate tensions. President Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet virtually Monday evening. It'll be the third time the leaders have talked since Biden took office. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. We just want to do, Nancy mentioned this, we did a breaking headline, but a little bit more about Steve Bannon, indicted today by a federal grand jury on 2 counts of contempt of Congress after he failed to comply with a subpoena from the January 6th House Select Committee, the U.S. Justice Department saying in a statement.
Yeah, Merrick Garland saying, Attorney General Merrick Garland, I should say, saying, quote, "Since my first day in office, I have promised Justice Department employees that together we would show the American people by word and deed that the department adheres to the rule of law, follows the facts and the law, and pursues equal justice under the law. Today's charges reflect the department's steadfast commitment to these principles."
Yeah, and just reading from Politico, doing some reporting, the House referred Bannon to the Justice Department for prosecution last month after he refused to cooperate with a congressional subpoena. The move seen as a major victory for the January 6th Select Committee, which has viewed Bannon's recalcitrance as a stumbling block in their probe, encouraging other potential witnesses to stonewall investigators. This has to do with investigators looking into that January 6th attack on the Capitol and very much looking at the president's inner circle when it comes to what did they know, when did they know it, what was the communication back and forth potentially, I guess, with the president. But Mark Meadows, Dan Scavino, Steve Bannon are among those who have been subpoenaed. These are all former aides to former President Donald Trump.
We should note that federal prosecutors in Washington obtained the grand jury indictment. It's the first significant legal action that the department has taken under President Joe Biden and Garland to bolster the wide-ranging congressional investigation. Carol, we think back to what happened, I believe it was late summer, early fall last year, late summer, when Steve Bannon was arrested and then ultimately pardoned before President Trump left office for something else.
Right, exactly. And it's just a reminder, though, that when it comes to the work out of the nation's capital and different committees, different investigators, the January 6th uprising there at the Capitol certainly being still investigated in a big way. All right, stick around. We got lots more to come right here on Business Week. Carol Massar, Tim Stanovic, and you are listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. A down week for the S&P 500 index this week, lower by 0.3%. And up Friday, Dow, S&P, NASDAQ all advancing, ending the day close to session highs as we head into the weekend. S&P up 33, up 0.7%. The Dow up 179, up 0.5%. NASDAQ up 156, up today by 1%. 10-year yield 1.57%. Equities climb, led by technology and communication services as inflationary pressures continue to reverberate through markets. Gold up 0.2%. Spot gold $18.65 the ounce. Crude down 0.9%. West Texas Intermediate crude $80.84 a barrel. We're all traveling more, and while that's great news for airlines, hotels, and car rental companies, not so great for those meal kit companies. Blue Apron Holdings finds customers eager to go on vacation or pausing their meal kit subscriptions. Blue Apron today down by 3.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, first, we are not getting a holiday or day off for New Year's, which it happens because it falls on a weekend this year, thanks to a wonky NYSE rule known as 7.2. And now this, Tim, turkey and the trimmings are going to cost more.
And you better buy it soon.
I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, you're busted. You're busted because you're kind of playing it. You're playing it close, right?
I know.
You're cutting it close.
I know. I said to my husband, get the turkey. He's like, I'm not buying frozen. I'm not buying frozen.
All right, well, let's get into all the details. Amelia Pollard is consumer reporter for Bloomberg News. She's with us in the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. Among the most read today on the Bloomberg Terminal is her story about U.S. Thanksgiving and inflation colliding in one big pricey meal. Okay, so let's just...
No, I'm really not going to be able to get my turkey because they've read your story and everybody's gone out and bought their turkey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just give it to us straight here. I mean, just how much worse is it going to be now than in previous years?
Yeah, prices have been increasing. So it's bad, but it's going to get, it's worse. It's worse this year for sure. Turkeys are at an all-time high. They're 20% higher than last year.
Why are they higher?
It's a lot of reasons. Across the meat packaging industry, labor shortages have really hit meat packaging hard. And so although we're seeing whole turkey costs are increasing, what we're also seeing is turkey breasts are also increasing in costs. And that's for a couple of reasons. One being that we're seeing that Americans are still continuing to have smaller Thanksgivings this year. So they're opting for turkey breasts, and so there's higher demand, not so much supply. I mean, we're seeing this, across a lot of food. But I think there's kind of all eyes on Thanksgiving because it's a big ticket item. I mean, the turkey is the big ticket item, and so the fact that it's 20% higher this year, year over year from 2020 is going to hit a lot of families' bottom line.
I think of the years that we did two turkeys. We did did that fried turkey out in the yard and then had one in the oven.
That's what my brother does every year. He loves it.
The fried turkey.
Huge fire hazard, but he loves it.
What's funny, and you said it is a huge. It's like
I know,
a lot
he has this whole setup with fire extinguishers and it's in the middle of this concrete.
It's kind of cauldron type.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say about turkey breasts. The first year that my husband, he's a great cook, and he did Thanksgiving for my family, and he did turkey breasts. It's something called Turkey Prince Orloff, and my family's like, "Where's the regular turkey?" He never did that again. The poor guy. But it's going to be expensive. It's funny, not funny, but the labor issues are impacting. When we talk about inflation, transitory or not, please don't judge me for using that word again. But I mean, a lot of it has to do with, I guess, companies just can't bring in enough workers to get it done, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. And, it's interesting you bring up the turkey breast, and I was,
Did you have another turkey breast tragedy?
Yeah, well, I was, interviewing customers just while they were shopping on the Upper East Side last week, and so I went to Target, and a handful of people told me, that they're opting for the turkey breast again, and so that means no leftovers. So I think this might be the year of fewer leftovers, because if people are spending less and getting turkey breasts and wanting to, cut back on maybe pumpkin pies or whatever
That's
it might be.
the whole point. It's the next day you have pie and turkey and all that good stuff.
The best thing is a Thanksgiving sandwich the next day.
Exactly.
So no more Thanksgiving sandwiches.
Hey, Amelia, to kind of drill into what Carol's talking about, where
Tim's
are
going to get serious.
price
You and I are having
increases
fun.
coming from? Well, so we know that labor costs are going up, transportation costs are going up. Does it cost more to feed these turkeys throughout the year? Where are the costs going up that then have to be passed on to consumers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for meat, we're seeing it with labor costs the most. I mean, there were, series of virus outbreaks, during 2020 with meat packaging facilities. And it takes a lot more workers to deconstruct, a whole turkey into parts. So when you're talking about the fried turkey parts, that takes, a few more workers per a turkey. And so I think that's really where you're seeing costs increasing and being passed on to consumers is with those turkey parts specifically.
I love in your story too, you talk about a regenerative farm, Rome Ranch in Texas, and you talk about facing rising feed, grain, and labor costs for its pasture-raised turkeys, but they're also having trouble getting enough of those frozen and refrigerated trucks.
Yeah, they are. And, it's interesting. I think there's been a trend in the last year or two, aside from the frozen meat, of people just being more concerned about the quality of the meat. So I think there are a lot of families who are kind of waiting for those fresh turkeys in the last days before Thanksgiving. And,
I'm going to be eating sausage or like hot dogs.
Well, you might be eating a chicken.
on Thanksgiving. Or chicken.
Because you guys aren't going to get a turkey?
I'm just fearful, yeah.
I mean, I think this weekend you have to decide that it's the weekend
He's the
that you're
cook.
going to go.
I can't, you don't mess with the cook.
Yeah, okay.
Just
fair.
saying.
We're not going to give you any leftovers, Carol. Okay?
No.
So,
well, what we really want to know? How about wine? Is wine accessible?
Yeah, well, that's
Beverages?
a really good point, because when I spoke to an economist about this who gave me a breakdown of, how much the average family of four is going to be paying for Thanksgiving this year. So the average will be $26 per family of four, which is really affordable. And that's, taking into account.
For all costs?
So that's minus alcohol. So with alcohol and wine, he said you're going to be spending an extra $25 per person. And he made the point that if in-laws are over, that it could be even more per person.
So 26 without the alcohol, and then bump up another 25?
And that's a conservative figure. He made the point
26 overall for a family of four?
Overall. But that, that's assuming that you're buying your produce and items at, a budget, Walmart or somewhere that's pretty affordable. He said that if you're hosting Thanksgiving in Manhattan, it's going to be, double that, if not more.
So, Amelia, how should we think about this moving forward? I won't use the T word, but are these the type of costs that are going to be sticking with us into holidays next year, 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend?
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of earnings calls last couple weeks for, food manufacturers. And I think the reality is, it's sticky. We're starting to hear the word sticky a little bit more than transitory.
Well, when you talk wage growth, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Sticky.
Yeah, wage growth is sticky, and I think supply chain issues will be moving into 2022. I mean, we definitely heard economists and others, experts saying we'll see this into Christmas and Easter.
Are there any companies not actually hiring because they don't want to pay higher wages, and they're just kind of holding up and just saying, "Sorry, we'll just raise prices on the existing material"?
That's a great question. So far, I haven't seen that, but that I will be on the lookout. I think that's a good next story.
This was so much fun. Get your turkey. I'll try. I'll work on my husband. I'll work on it. All right. Thank you so much, Amelia Pollard. She is consumer reporter at Bloomberg News. What a great story. It is being read on the Bloomberg, and it's so relevant to our time, not only because of Thanksgiving, but because of that T word and inflation. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, folks, it's been a really, really busy week, which we love here at Bloomberg. We're going to wrap up, though, with something fun. It's the author of a new book, but she's also one of the members of the iconic all-female band, the Go-Go's. Go back to the 80s.
I'm just going to say, watch us on YouTube if you're listening on the radio right now. This book is awesome. You've got to pick it up. It's a stunning book, incredible photographs. Looking forward to chatting with her in just a few minutes.
And she was the photographer. So we're going to get into it in just a moment. Gina Schock's going to be with us. All right, first up, though, Charlie. Vacation.
Baby, and my lips aren't sealed. Never. Here's what's going on. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all moving higher with the S&P up 33 points, up 0.7%. Vacation was a great song. The Dow up 179, up 0.5%. Still is. NASDAQ up 156, higher by 1%. We've got the 10-year yield 1.56%. Spot gold up 0.1%, 1864 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.9%. 80.84 as we head into the weekend. Losing week for the S&P, down this week. Turbulent week, down 0.3%. Losing week for the Dow this week, down 0.6. This week, NASDAQ down by 0.7%. Today, though, an up day led higher by technology and communication services. The S&P up 33, up 0.7. A new labor group seeking to organize Amazon warehouse workers at facilities on Staten Island has withdrawn its petition with the National Labor Relations Board. As I mentioned, an update today, but there are concerns about excesses in the market. Bill Smead is Chief Investment Officer at Smead Capital Management. He was our guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
There's no clock on the wall, right? Buffett always says that you know, a financial euphoria episode is like Cinderella's ball. When the clock strikes 12, it's all going to turn to pumpkins and mice. No one puts a clock on the wall, so you don't know what time it is.
Add another milestone to Rivian Automotive's blistering and surprising run as a new stock. It is now the biggest American company by market value with no revenue. Up today, Rivian by 5.7%. Run HCP on the Bloomberg up 22.1%. Yesterday, 29.14% on its IPO Wednesday. Recapping stocks higher, S&P up 33, up 0.7. Cannot ignore J&J, by the way, up today by 1.2%. And that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. This is Bloomberg. We definitely got the beat on this Friday, and the story behind the beat is all laid out in a new book. It's entitled Made in Hollywood. The book has been described as a visual 40-year blast through the past of the Go-Go's wildest journey and more. So much fun to have joining us on this Friday, helping us to wrap up this week. Gina Schock, a member of the iconic and original girl band. We're talking about the first all-female rock group, write their own songs, play their own instruments, reach the top of the Billboard charts. The band, as we said, the Go-Go's, and her new book, Made in Hollywood, All Access with the Go-Go's. She joins us on the phone in San Francisco. Gina, really, really excited to have you here. Thanks for joining Tim and myself. How are you?
Oh, I'm still pretty high from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing. It's just kind of unbelievable. It's funny. You sort of, you poo-poo it. It's like, I don't care about this stuff. But then when it happens, it's mind-blowing. It's like, okay, you feel like you're recognized by your fans. Don't get me wrong. But then this sort of recognition it's a whole different thing because all your peers were there, all the other musicians and songwriters and people in my business were all there celebrating this like triumph for the band, and it felt good to get all those props, all that love and respect, and it felt very genuine as well. It was quite an evening, my friend, quite an evening.
And you accepted the honor from Drew Barrymore, I know, at the ceremony.
Yeah.
I mean, like all of it, right?
Yeah, but then people were like, "What's the deal with Drew Barrymore?" Well, the deal is that it couldn't have been someone better to give us that award because Drew's been a real fan of this band since he's been a kid. And I was like, in case you don't know it, well, now the word is out. And after the show, we were talking with Drew throughout the show, but it was like I didn't really realize how much of an impression we had left on her, because she said, you know, Gina, through the years, I mean, we all know that she went through a lot of difficult periods in her life, just like we all have, okay? But I didn't realize that we helped her through a lot of stuff. And that was, I don't know, you can't believe it when, you know, you might think that about other people when you think, oh, I remember when this song happened and how it helped me through this relationship and that. But when it actually happens to you, it's sort of, you can't take it all in to feel like you've made that deep of an impression on someone.
Right.
It's pretty incredible to hear that, Gina, because I would imagine that you do hear from fans a lot about what the effect that your music has had on them.
I am these days, but you gotta remember, guys, I come home and I'm cleaning up my dog's poop and I'm doing dishes and I'm back to the real life, which is most of my life. And then you go out there for a couple months of the year and you're rock star and this and that. You don't think about that all the time. Then when it's brought to your attention, like I was like, oh my God, this is really my job. How cool is that?
Well,
what job do I have?
We have to say your book really made an impression on us, and you are the unofficial, I guess, or official photographer, self-appointed archivist, I think is how somebody described you, of the band. It really is an incredible history, but also the visual story that you tell. You're taking photos, it sounds like, all the time.
Little did I know that all these years later, it would all surface in the way that it has, because back then I just was always drawn to I'm a very visual person. I was always drawn to photographs, and in my house even I have 99% of my art is all photographs from various big photographers, or some not so much, but it's always something that's driven me. And so when I started taking photos with the band, it felt like a very natural thing to do. The only difference is that, hey, I happen to be in the band, so I'm getting all these candid shots that no one else would ever be privy to if they weren't in the band. And I just had such a love for photography, and I still do. And I can't believe I had my first photo exhibition in Los Angeles this past weekend, and it was something that I only would have dreamt I could do. You surprise yourself with the things that you are capable of.
Right.
Given the opportunity, you just sort of stand up and you take, I think I can do that. And wow, everything's working out great, guys.
I would say it's all worked out really well. Hey, sit tight for a second. We got to do a little bit of news, but we want to continue with you, Gina. Gina Schock, her new book, Made in Hollywood, all access with the Go-Go's. And like we said, it really is just, I was prepping for the segment last night and I was reading through the book and I finally was like, I got to go home.
It's the book where you got to go into a bookshop and pick it up and hold it and look at it. It's a beautiful book. All
right, we're going to continue with her because I also want to, she talks about the impression the band has made on others, but I'm curious about the folks that have made impressions on her because as they were going through as the Go-Go's, were meeting some really amazing musicians and individuals. So I'm curious who made impressions on her as well. In the meantime, back to World and National News, and I'm guessing she was a Go-Go's fan. Nancy Lyons in D.C.
Yes,
right?
I did. I went to a concert many a year ago.
Love.
Love it, yes. Former Donald Trump advisor Steve Bannon has been indicted for defying subpoenas by the Special Congressional Committee investigating the deadly January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol. It's a major move by the Justice Department to compel cooperation by the former president's associates. Bannon is charged with 2 contempt counts. The Justice Department says an arraignment date has not been set. Attorney General Merrick Garland says since his first day in office, he's vowed to follow the facts and the law and to pursue equal justice. Well, the time is now set for when President Biden holds a virtual summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says it'll happen Monday night.
The two leaders will discuss ways to responsibly manage the competition between the United States and the PRC, as well as ways to work together where our interests align.
Psaki says the president will make clear U.S. intentions and priorities, and he will be candid about the U.S. concerns with China. Biden will also be meeting with the leaders of Mexico and Canada next Thursday. Climate talks are set to stretch into the weekend as leaders work on their final report. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry says one key complaint has come from countries that do not have the money to invest in new and cleaner technologies.
Less developed countries desperately need additional help. We agree with that. From day one at this COP, we've been saying the United States wants to raise the amount for adaptation. We support it.
Kerry is welcoming the latest draft text, which added lines that only unabated coal use and inefficient subsidies be phased out instead of all of them. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Thank you so much, Nancy Lyons. Still with us, Gina Schock. She, of course, the drummer of the Go-Go's, and she's got a new book out. It's pretty incredible. It's gorgeous. Made in Hollywood, all access with the Go-Go's. Gina, we just have about a minute and a half, and then we're going to do a little bit more news, and we'll come back and then talk for a longer chunk of time. But your whole book is just filtered with all your pictures. Just got about a minute or so. Is there a favorite picture or a picture that you just love to talk about? Yeah, no, it's like favorite child.
Well, you guys, I've been asked that several times, and it's really difficult for me to give you an honest answer because everything in this book I love. There's a reason I took this photograph or that photograph, this or that, and they all really have some very important meaning to me. That is a moment in time that I'll never relive, that I can look at, and then I remember everything. It all comes back to me. That's how come I wound up writing so much. This was initially just going to be photographs, and boy, when I was asked to write some, I thought, I can't do this, but looking at the photographs, the words just started pouring out. There's so many photographs in this book, you guys. I'm looking through it right now that I love. Of course, the clown family happens to be one of my favorite of the bunch, that whole segment of photographs, because it's so insane and ridiculous. And just goes to show you that they would do anything that I asked them to do.
Well, that's what crazy. They had such trust, right? I mean, you really had front row seat, behind seat, like in terms of just catching them, the whole group at any moment.
Yeah. I mean, we're just basically a group of 5 girls, our little girl gang, just having a great time and living for the moment and, enjoying ourselves 100%. And that's what it should have been, blemishes and all. It's part of growing and experiencing life and through a lens that most people don't ever have the opportunity.
All right, hang on for a second. We're going to come back and continue with Gina Schock, of course, drummer of the Go-Go's, on her book, Made in Hollywood. We'll continue in just a moment because we want to talk to her about some of those that influenced her in the group. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, Tim Stanovic. This is Bloomberg.
1130.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleton. Up Friday, a down week for the week. The S&P declined 0.3%. Today, however, an advance of 0.7 for the S&P, up 33 points so far this year. The S&P is up 24.6%. We've got the Dow up 179, up 0.5%. NASDAQ up 156, up today by 1%. 10-year yield 1.56%. Spot gold up 0.1%, 1864 the ounce. Bitcoin down 1.4%, 64,184 on Bitcoin. Gold up 0.1%, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.9%, 80.82 a barrel. Equities advance led by technology and communication services as inflationary pressures continue to reverberate through markets. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Want to get right back to our guest. Still with us is Gina Schock, drummer, of course, of the Go-Go's. We're talking about her book that is out. It is called Made in Hollywood, All Access with the Go-Go's, and she's still with us on the phone in San Francisco. So, Gina, you were talking about, how when Drew Barrymore, introduced you guys at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the impact that your band had on her. What about those that had impacts on you? Because one of the things that was kind of cool going through your book is the bands that you opened for, the iconic musicians like yourself that you guys ran into, met. Tell us about some of those meetings, some of those things that were just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm me.
Well, I am the ultimate fan. Let me tell you, I just adore them all. Music is my whole life, and it's always been, and I feel so lucky to be able to contribute. Meeting David Bowie was a huge thing in my life. I idolized him growing up, and had the utmost respect. The guy was a genius. And I got to meet him 3 times, and that was super duper cool. It was actually the first time I met him. The photo of us in the book is when he was doing the Sirius Moonlight Tour, and we actually got to open for him too, I think, at Anaheim Stadium. That was very cool. But the first time I met him was in 1980, before the Go-Go's were even signed. We were playing at the Ritz in New York City. Check this out. We didn't have a record deal. We had just gotten back from England. We had been opening for Madness and the Specials over there. So we all had our boyfriends with us. So Madness were at our show. But we get done and we go to the VIP section, and they're like, guess who was at your show? Who? Okay, David Bowie and his constant companion, Coco, Pete Townsend, and John and Yoko. Now, unfortunately, John and Yoko left during the encore, and yet in a couple months he was gone. That son of a bitch murdered him.
Right.
But the two of them had seen the show. That meant a whole lot to me. And Pete Townsend, that meant a lot. And then, of course, Bowie. And meeting him and talking to him, he was such a gentleman and so generous with his time. And we were all getting high and having a great time. But wow, what an incredible night that was for me. And of course, meeting the Stones and opening for the Stones. I mean, these are things you dream of, And man, it's like having a little old Gina from Dundalk in Baltimore. It's like, it's crazy stuff, guys. It's like your dreams can happen. They can really happen if you just work hard and keep your shit together. It's amazing what you can accomplish. It's all inside of you. You just have to stay focused and do the right thing. That's all. That's it.
Hey, Gina, what has it been like in 2021, getting back there on the road and doing it at a time when we're in the midst of a pandemic? How are you doing it?
Well, it's been rough because the last 2 years we've had our tours canceled. We had last year we were having a summer tour. This year was canceled. So fortunately, we are going to be doing some shows at the end of the year on the West Coast, which we're all really excited about. And then, of course, next year we're going to be doing shows with Billy Idol in the UK, playing like at Wembley and Leeds Arena, all these fantastic places to play. And then we're going to be doing more shows in the States. But on top of that, this year it's just been incredible for us because it seems like everything's sort of coming to fruition. Our documentary really pushed people, I think, to recognize the band and know the band in a way that they hadn't prior to that. Also, our musical, which was out on Broadway a couple of years ago, that's coming back. That's at the Pasadena Playhouse, in a week. And it's opening in Australia again, head over heels. That's really cool. And then the induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then now I'm doing my book tour and my first photo exhibition. And it's wow.
Well,
it's great, guys.
Well, it's just, it is interesting. And you really do think about the impact that you had. I mean, there's so many female musicians now. And if you think about, though, when you guys went out and did your thing, it wasn't commonplace.
Not so much.
No,
right?
not so much. Go ahead, please.
And, I'm on, I'm checking Instagram out every day. There are so many girls that are playing drums now and shredding on guitar. There are so, now there's this, the latest statistic is that there are more girls learning instruments than there are guys now to play. How do you like that one, guys?
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's the latest. And it's really great. I'm hoping that we've had an influence on them. I feel that we have. I've heard that a lot. And it's, to me, the best gift that I could ever leave when I close my eyes on this planet is to think that I've inspired someone to step out of their comfort zone, perhaps, and do what they love to do.
I'm always curious, because it's so easy for all of us to be like, oh my God, everything must have been so wonderful and so easy. But it's life on the road is not always easy. And I'm just wondering,
it's hard work.
It's hard work. I mean, what was one of the toughest times being out there and doing your thing?
Oh, geez. I guess I'd have to say the toughest time that we ever had on the road was when we were playing in the UK and opening for Madison, especially because their fan base, those guys came over to the States and we opened for them. We were sort of the house band at the Whiskey and the Roxy on Sunset Strip. So any bands that would come into town, we'd open for them. Well, they loved us and they helped bring us to the UK to open for them on their tour for a month with one band and a month with the other. And their crowd hated us. Every night I was dodging, glasses being thrown at me and bottles, and Belinda would walk off stage covered with gobs of spit, crying. We were just a mess.
That's terrible.
And we really went through, and we were living on £2.50 a day. £2.50 a day is what our allowance was to eat. We were eating stuff we were eating Cadbury bars. It was tough. It was tough. We were so excited when we were on tour with Madison, especially because we got to eat, what they had ordered. We got to eat their food with them because we didn't have any money.
Wow. That is pretty...
It was tough. But you know what? Also the most rewarding thing, because it's at the end of that whole run, I feel like we maybe had won them over a little bit, but we certainly had won ourselves over because we realized that we could do anything.
Yeah,
we were to hell with them. We're going to do our show. We're going to kick ass. And you know what? You just shut up and watch us. Just shut up and give us a minute and listen to what we're doing.
Well, you definitely showed. And like I said, I remember two of my cousins. They're going to be loving that I talked with you because they just loved you, and you just set something out there for we women in a big way. So good luck with the tour and getting back out on the road and continuing out on the road. Gina Schock, drummer of the Go-Go's. Check out the book Made in Hollywood, All Access with the Go-Go's.
Let's head now to Washington, D.C. Joe Matthew is standing by. Joe, I'm guessing a big part of your show is focused on Steve Bannon today.
Yeah, we're going to get into that and talk about it with Congressman John Sarbanes from Maryland. His father was the one who introduced the impeachment article against President Richard Nixon. So we'll have a lot to talk about with history, guys, in the backdrop today.
Yeah, we do wonder, right, if this is just a real pivotal moment when it comes to that investigation, Joe.
Or he could go to jail. And what's the precedent for Mark Meadows and all the other Trump aides who've shunned this committee? We're going to get into that next.
All right. Looking forward to it. Good to have you in town here in New York yesterday.
Great to see you guys.
It was really good to see you. Joe Matthew, host of Sound On. That's coming your way in just a moment. We're done.
We're done. On to the weekend and then next week, Carol.
You got the beat.
I got the beat and retail earnings. That's what I'm thinking about.
Don't go there.
Yeah, why not?
Check out our weekend show. You can catch that at 8 a.m. on Bloomberg Radio, and also catch out our podcast. For Tim Stendevic, our whole Business Week team, they're amazing. They get it done for us every week. Have a good weekend.
the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide. In Silicon Valley and beyond, this is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, it was quite the week for breakups, company breakups, that is. GE, Toshiba, and now Johnson & Johnson, all announcing a business split. Could this trend spill into the tech sector where so many